How's everybody going? Welcome to a trade recap from SMTFX. We're going to be covering a trade recap on USDJPY short on a trade taken today on the the second week of February on the first day of the week. So this was a major trade taken today for us. Um, this trade was basically predicted to hit about 41 in profit. But it was closed early, mainly because of the change of character I saw earlier on in this area over here. So let's just break down the whole idea behind how this trade came along. Looking at the higher time frames, let's look at the 4 hour or the 2 hour first. I saw what we saw was price was basically, in a sense we're bullish, right? Because of how we're moving up here. In this region, we had a mitigation over here of this supply zone, and we had a push down, right? And what we had next was another sort of mitigation over here, which is what happened here. We had this break of structure here in a sense, even though it didn't break this point, it broke this point. So I'd class it as a proper break of structure. Now, a break of structure would be a lot more convincing if it broke the previous swing low, but in this case, this was sufficient enough with the entry criteria that we saw and price action in itself. So let's just have a look at how I basically got the supply zone, right? In this area, a lot of people might not be sure of what supply zone to mark out, right? You could mark out the last two or the most major buy candles that you can see, or you can move around your entry or your time frames and find the clearest buy candle you can find. Now in this case, you can see price is quite efficient, so there isn't anything clear at the moment. So if you look at the 8 hour, this candle basically covers that whole region that I was interested in taking a trade from. Um, you could have taken this last sell candle over here, this sell candle before the impulsive move down, but I usually like to mark the buy candles or the sell candles depending if it's a demand or supply zone. So that was the supply zone that I marked out, and essentially price tapped in, and we'll drop to the 15 minutes to have a closer look at what happened. So market open was just around here, right? And usually with market open, there's a bit of gap that happens, and that gap is usually covered. So that's what we saw. I didn't intend on trading this up or anything because I was looking for shorts in this region. Um, so around this area here, that's when I actually saw my first trading opportunity for a short, which did fail, right? It didn't successfully, push down like I intended it to, but it did give me an idea of what to expect next. So in this region, I basically just had a short entry over here, and I wanted to look for price. I wanted price to push down further. I had a 1.2 pip stop, and mainly because I would have a 1 pip instead of a 1.2, but I just had a bit of a buffer for my spreads on my broker. So price was set on the 25% mark. I don't set price on the equilibrium or the 50% mark anymore, mainly because I find myself missing a lot of trades. Now, I'm sure a lot of you might have that issue where you put it in the equilibrium, you're missing trades, you put it on the disto, you might be wondering like, but my stop loss is a bit bigger than I want it to. Now, you have two options, right? And I'm sure a lot of other communities and a lot of other traders might tell you the same thing. You either be a bit more riskier and you set a smaller stop loss by putting it in the equilibrium or the 25% mark, 35% mark, and your trade may or may not get tapped in, or you put in a disto, which is the most safest option, and you basically have a slightly larger stop loss, but have a higher chance of being tapped in. So these are the two options you have as a trader when you want to put your entries, right? So moving back to the trade, this trade basically hit all my entry criteria. We see a classic supply to demand fail. We had our chalk as well, and we had other criteria that we usually look for in SMT. So this was the first failed trade I had. Now let's look at what price did after that. So what price did was it pushed all the way up, right? And at this point I was thinking, okay, cool, we've got this demand zone here, and if it's respected, then we can continue to look for longs. But what happened is in this case was it broke through that demand zone instantly and you didn't even get a reaction off of it. So there wasn't even any valid trades to take from there. Um, so when that demand zone broke, it told me that okay, cool. So now we have a broken demand zone that tells me that price is going to continue pushing forward, pushing down. And in this case, I can comfortably be looking for shorts, right? Because we've got a break of structure, we've got a demand failing, so that tells us that price is turning bearish, right? The momentum's kicking in, and we want to look for shorts. So in this case, we had these two candles marked up. This would have been a decisional candle, so the candle before the first break of the demand zone. So that was the candle before that. And then we have our extreme candle, which is the one all the way on top, right? So I mark both these zones up and I want to look for a reaction off of either one of them. Preferably I want to have a reaction from the extreme candle, but sometimes that doesn't happen, which is exactly what happened in this point. So what happened was I was looking for, either one to be tapped in, and in this region here, we had a reaction from this zone, right? This last two buy candles up, which is our decisional candle before the break over here, and I dropped down to the seconds time frame, which is something that we specifically have hidden for our SMT members to look at, because it has our full entry criteria list for the seconds time frame. So there was a very interesting sort of a entry model that was created on the seconds time frame that fit our rules perfectly, right? And what happened was I initially waited to put a limit, but because of how small the stop is, I decided to wait on and wait for price to hit to a price, or basically a quotation that I want to take, right? So as soon as price hit the 273 region, right, that's when I took my sell. And I had a same thing, 1.2 pip stop, and I basically waited for price to just react off of it. And as you can see, price rejected beautifully all the way down, and we also had a scale in over here. Now I didn't take that scale in because obviously I missed it, and I'm not gonna bullshit anyone by telling you I took this scale in, but there 100% was a scale in here. The only fact was that it missed my entry by a few pipettes, right? So I'm not too concerned of that, but there was an entry over here on the seconds time frame, actually, not on the minute. You could take the 1 minute time frame and take this short, you wouldn't have missed it, but I missed it on the seconds time frame. So moving forward, we had another interesting zone we're looking at. So in this region here, we can see that price basically created a demand zone over here, and it basically broke through, right? So this demand zone was broken through, and then we had this supply zone here, right? This was the first candle that I marked up because that was the one that made the most sense. And we looked at how price reacted again, and similarly it reacted to this wick here. Now on this wick, it was something on the seconds time frame that I saw, but obviously the first time it reacted off of it, I didn't think anything of it because I wanted it to react to this point. Now price didn't react to this point, instead it reacted to this point. So what did I do? I basically waited for, a entry model to set up and then took a trade on it, right? So it reacted once and then I went, okay, let's have a look on the seconds time frame. And on the seconds time frame, coincidentally, the exact same thing you saw in this region was basically the exact same thing that happened on the first initial trade. The exact same entry model that happens over and over again. It repeats itself every single day in the market. All you have to do is spot it. It happened again, and that's when I took this trade. Exact same entry model, same stop loss, and we left it to run, right? So price, initially I had my target at over here. I think it was about 913, and we barely almost hit it, but we didn't. I think we peaked at 915, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, so we peaked at 915 and then we sort of rejected up. Um, so at this point, I basically looked at price and went, okay, so we're not really going to be pushing back down, but I want to wait and see how price reacts to this point. And what we saw was we had a supply zone here, and I kept seeing price push up, right? And at this point, I knew that I saw a chalk here and a few other things that basically told me that price may be pushing back up because we have reacted off of a demand zone here, right? Which is where my entry, or sorry, my take profit was set. So in this case, what I did was I waited for price to, sort of react off of it. And at this point, I went, okay, you know what? I'm going to take my profits. So I took 6R from this and I took 22.33R from this and I closed my trade at a 27.3R profit, sorry, 28.3R profit. And because of, the charges from my broker, it was about, I think, close to 28. And that's where I closed my trade. So the smartest thing was to actually close my trade just when it was about to hit here, but unfortunately I was having my dinner, so I wasn't able to close my trade, but we left it running anyways to see how it reacts. And what we are seeing right now is basically price just breaking through this demand zone, sorry, the supply zone that I had in mind. Now, this was the trade that was taken today on USDJPY. Um, it was a pretty decent trade, almost close to potentially 40R trade. That was closed at about 27, 28R. I'm not bothered at all with, all the profits that I must have missed from eating dinner because, that's what happens with trading. You sometimes miss closing your trades earlier and may lose a few, 10% profit or, a few percent profit along the way. But it's important to know that, the market does the same thing over and over again every day, depending on what pair you're looking at. So you just want to be sure that you're able to identify these points of interest or zones that you want to take trades off of, and then just be aware of how they're reacting to specific zones. So these were the trades I took, guys. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comment section. Follow us on Instagram, and yeah, that'll be all. Hope you guys enjoyed this trade recap and have a wonderful day, everyone.